All right, are we recording? I've seen a lot of changes happen around here over the years. Like, for instance, this place here, when I was a little kid, there were log yards a little ways west of here. And they, always use these little, like, identification tags for the loads of the logs. And occasionally they would fall off. So there was these little plastic tags with numbers on them littered all over these roads here. They'd be in the ditches and whatnot. And it's funny because it's been decades since that was an issue. It wasn't a big deal. I mean, there were so many log trucks. In fact, this was kind of the truck route to some degree. It's kind of the back roads that would lead to the major truck route from the highway. And I look at it and I think to myself, that's just a little bit of the forgotten past that once upon a time here. I was going through the city park the other day, you know, and I was kind of amazed because when I lived out in the woods for 4 years in the early 2000s, sometimes I would occasionally drive by and use the water spigots to, top off my big blue jugs. And, there were a lot of other places I went as well. But it was convenient, I was already going by this place, heading back out west, about 15 miles from here where I lived. And over the years, they pulled out more of the water spigots. Now there's none. The little cabins that are in the park, that, when I was just like 25 years ago or so, me and my buddies used to do this thing called amp guard, which is basically buffering. You take the PVC pipe and you put the pipe foam on it, you put the duct tape, and you got yourself a play sword, live action role playing essentially. Except for, not totally dressed up. It's like people in the SCA make fun of people in amp guard, and people in Red Fairs make fun of the people in the SCA. But it was good, wholesome fun. And there was these little cabins adjacent to the big forest that had a bunch of trails through it. And we used to do siege battles in those. Now, like one of the cabins that used to be there is gone. And who knows, maybe it was a fire, something, I don't know. But it's been gone for a long time, if I remember right. And all the other ones they have plywood boarding them up. And no surprise that about the same time, all these boarded up cabins, and they weren't like really super nice cabins. There weren't like glass windows or anything. They were just primitive, rustic cabins that the kids would go over and run over there and play in them. There's a piece of paperwork on the front of the plywood, and it says, well, due to a vote and the deteriorating nature of the cabins, the original owners that brought these here in the 1960s, whatever year, 69 or whatever, people who basically donated these classic rustic cabins so people in the parks could play in them, are requesting to take them back, to put them up, to restore them, put them somewhere where the public can use them. Part of the thing is there's homeless people all over my hometown now. And look, I bum change occasionally. I'm either a truck driver or a bum. I'm not against working a normal job, but I'm more of a nomadic seasonal person. In fact, that's one of the problems. We have camp bums. I'm a nomad. So we're not the same category. In fact, I take my change going really fucking professionally. But these people show up, and like I said the other night, a lot of what we're seeing with the homeless, if I'm being honest about it, is we live in a world where everybody was told to have all these children. But there was no real plan in the long run what these kids were going to do. I mean, I wish that some of these people had become plumbers and electricians and all these other things. But you know how many of these people, a lot of these people that you see on the streets, They're deadheads, they're dropouts. They were the losers back in the day that had jobs around here, probably working at some sort of sawmill. It's called shake mills, where it's not, we're not talking about weed. We're talking about, where they take blocks of cedar and cut them into shake bolts. Shake bolts cut into cedar shakes or shingles. These people worked in the forest. And rent was affordable back in the day. Like in the early 2000s, before I moved out to the woods, I rented a little bungalow apartment with everything but electricity included for $300 a month. So believe it or not, even back then, if they were working at a dollar store or, Taco Bell or, whatever, those people had a place to live. Even in the declining economy that we've always been in, this town has always had around double the unemployment rate of the rest of the country. I grew up in this. I saw, the fall of the logging industry happen when I was a little kid. We moved out here about 1988, lived out a town west of here, 70 miles west of here. And that logging crash, all because of the government, by the way. The same government that promised, there'll be timber, there's more than enough timber, we'll just manage it, we'll cut it at an even flow for years. And because of a bunch of environmental judges, they shut down pretty much the whole West Coast forest and crashed the economy. But even back then, during the unemployment and then the welfare, and now you got a lot of people that are just dudes that are just faking crazy. Because it's easier to fake crazy than it is to get a good paying job. And so that whole culture of a man works and he provides and does this, that's dying. That it still exists, but there's a lot of people that have checked out. And so among those people that have checked out, like $1,000 a month isn't, in a world where to afford a house, when I bought my house over there in the Rocky Mountain State for 50 grand, when I bought that house, it was basically $442 a month. Now that same house would probably cost $1,500 with the remodel, probably $1,500 to $2,000 a month. I don't know. It costs a lot more. So if I put the rent on that place, for instance, down to $1,200, I can get a decent renter because it's lower than what they'd have to pay for a mortgage. But if you look at and that's a West Coast, not a West Coast, but a Rocky Mountain little farm town place. Here, we're on the West Coast. We got rich people that have been moving in since the logging crash, buying up the cheap property, and there is no cheap property anymore. So we have a problem of a world that has literally forgotten a lot of these homeless people. Like we've told people, we need to have more children. Who's going to pay Social Security? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? And inevitably, what do you do with the people that are left behind, forgotten? What do you do with those people? Well, the world doesn't care. If you're a woman, you can just crank out a child and get, welfare, Section 8. It might take a little bit of a wait to get on that list, but you get on it, you can live the rest, like a good 25 years and longer on that. While you're raising your kids, get free education. Now, if you're a guy, you just get the 16 tons treatment. And that is 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. It's an old song about a guy that's just working himself into a grave. The expectation is that you're just going to go out and find something. Part of the reason I left this area, because don't get me wrong, there's things I really love about this area. The city, it's a weird mixed bittersweet thing, because I'm going to be honest, a lot of the people around here never really treated me that well. And the best thing I could have done when I was 21 or 18 is learn to drive truck and just left this fucking area. I look at the situation of this town, and then I see all the homeless people. I'm good. I'm actually good at bumming change. They're not. They're drug addicts. They're just standing there, anything will help. Like learn to shake your ass or something. Do something. Be a little animated, motherfuckers. And I see this kind of weird quasi-existence of the haves and the have-nots in a broke-ass town like this. And by the way, we've all got used to this decrepit state all over the country. That's what should make you think. And I don't know. When you look back at the logging crash and realize that it was a government manufactured collapse. You promised people there would be jobs. They invested their hard-earned money, took out loans, built mills, bought equipment, did all this, and then at the signing of a fucking pen over a fucking owl that it turns out was actually being out predicated by another bigger owl. Yeah, nature versus nature, and that's something. And then they find some other magical animal. And by the way, this isn't the only place I've seen this. Go down to the desert. Go down to the wasteland. Oh, the desert tortoise. Blah, blah, blah. That's why we got to kick all of you off the land. And I often wonder with some of this shit, is this a way, if there's really good natural minerals, like metals, minerals, some useful thing under the ground, is this how they kick you off the land? So down the road, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, they can do it. Or is this the way they make their own private playground for the 1%? Where they make it to where that camping that you used to do, look at those hills in the distance. There's 2 towers on one of those hills up there. I used to be able to drive up there. And it's been since the mid-2000s, early 2000s, since you could drive up there as a normal person. And they'd say, oh, there were garbage dumpers and people cooking meth and all this. Let me tell you how that works. The people that are still occasionally cooking meth, now they're probably just doing fentanyl. But the garbage dumpers, they just dump it right at the gate. And by the way, people are like, well, the van lifers. Okay, there are some trashy van lifers. And by the way, I'd like to rephrase that. These are just homeless fuckers living in RVs. Now, you've kicked all these people out of the forest for the most part. Or the places that you can still camp at are so goddamn far out that for most of these spawn camping homeless people, they don't want to do that. They're not smart. They don't understand the idea of a bicycle and a bus pass and how he's having someone at your camp to protect your camp. That's one thing I can say about this area. We have a decent bus system, mass transit system. You could go into town, hit up the food banks with a bicycle and some bike bags, and then go back out to the middle of nowhere on the bus and be doing just fine. But that's too much effort. And plus, you also got the soup kitchens and all the other assistants. So they just pretty much sit in town. But make no mistake, when I was a little kid, there were people who lived out in the middle of nowhere. They just had an RV or a camper and an old pickup truck or whatever, or even just sometimes tents. And they'd live out there, and then one day, the DNR started kicking all of them out. The Forestry Service started kicking them all out. And they're like, well, it's a bad image, and they leave trash. Now they're in the cities. So my kind of question is, on all of this, when I look back at what was and what is now, what are you going to do with these people? Especially the ones that are too far gone. Too many drugs, too much this. Are you going to put them all in asylums? How much is that going to cost America? Yeah? Is that what you're going to do? Or, are we really going to go total authoritarian and they're going to be talking about in the future, they're going to be like, well, there was that time they just, kind of disappeared all the retarded homeless people. Which I don't like throwing around that whole, the way the lefties do it with the whole like fascist, Nazi, talk and all that stuff. But sometimes you begin to wonder, you're like, what are you going to do with these people? The unrecoverable. You got to like ship them off to Africa or some shit? Okay, have fun. And these are American citizens, by the way. So I don't know. I just, what the rot that I see in my hometown is concerning. And I guess it's concerning everywhere. I can kind of understand people that, any town, they see homeless people. It isn't the fact that they're homeless. It's the fact that there's nothing being done. And that's a lot of it. Like I'm sitting there, I'm going through a town and I see you can see up on the cliff sides where the trees are, where they build like trails to get up into hidden areas. And then they build a camp. And then you have places where there are previous camps, and you'd think local people would just band together, with a dump truck, a dump bed or something, and just clean these places up to get them cleaned up. So at least it doesn't look like obviously there was a homeless camp there. But no, most of the trash, they kick the homeless people out, and whatever trash is left is still just sitting there rotting away. Because God forbid people do something about it. And then you see places up on some of the creeks, and I don't know what the dealio is. When I was a kid, if there was a homeless camp up one of the creeks, they kept it good and hidden. They were like, they wanted their privacy. They just, they wanted to drink and do their drugs and, whatever. Now you'll see like the branches on all the trees are cut off, almost like either the city did this or, the homeless people are just showing people, hey, we're here. This is where we are. We want you to know we're here. Just like when you see the old Cousin Eddie, like there's near one of the grocery stores, there's a ton of fucking Cousin Eddie mobiles. And look, I thought about parking in one of my old spots, but I also have seen some cases where, people got like spiderwebbed windshields because, I don't know, probably some punk kids or something, or who knows, homeless fight. That shit happens. Hell, there's a place that looks like it's some sort of, I was driving out towards the cemetery. I was seeing if there's any sort of park spots out there. I remember there used to be. There isn't now. I was driving out there, and there's just like a homeless assistance camp type of thing, or, shelter. And when I was driving out there, I saw like probably 6 or 7 cops all getting ready by one of the PUD stations. And I'm like, well, something's going down, like a drug bust or something. They all, as I'm driving out, they all went filing towards that homeless shelter, which then leads you to wonder, is there a fight? Is there warrants? Is there something? That's where we're at. That's where we're at. Our parks don't have normal facilities like they used to. They don't have toys for kids to play on. We got people spawn camping all over the place. In my opinion, it's a definite sign that we are a society in decline. It's not even doubtable. Like when I was in my early 20s and I lived out in the woods, people were like, "That's weird," because back then, yeah, if you were just a regular kind of a derelict druggy loser, you could still get a decent job and afford. Not even a decent job. You could get a job. It would be maybe a crappy job, but it was enough to pay your rent and get by. Now that's not happening. And now they're giving people like $1,000 a month if you're fucking nuts. So you still can't afford real rent. But you can afford a lot of drugs in a tent. This is the thing about West Coast politics that people hate. And I'm just wondering, are we going to see, are we gonna see some fucking DC style crackdowns in these cities? And here's the thing. I'm wondering what happened to those people that they rounded up. What do they do with those people? I'd like to know. What happened to those homeless people they rounded up. Did they send them to rehab? Did they, did they make a camp or something? They're like, hey, we got Job Corps. But like I said earlier, what do you do with the ones that are way too fucked up? Way too fucked up. What do you do with those ones? And that's my interest. How are you going to handle that? It's to some degree, those type of homeless are like society's nuclear waste. And for the most part, most people, as long as they can shuffle them along to some other place, some other problem, which is funny because ages ago in this particular town, Seattle, Tacoma, and some of the other cities, they load up all the homeless on a bus and just dump them out here. And back then, there was a lot of timber jobs. A lot of them even, settled down, had families, and a lot of them, they did the drugs. And this is back when there was no piss testing. People did drugs quietly, and people kind of maybe talked a little bit about it, but it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like, oh my God, you smoked some pot, and of course, if you got caught, then the man was on your ass. But of course, there were pill heads, crank, all that other shit. But coke, crack cocaine was kind of a thing. Meth has always been a fucking problem around here. But yeah, you think about it for a moment, and you're like, oh, okay. Where you can't ship them anywhere. You ship them out to the logging areas. There's no jobs. So I mean, that's one of the things. I think one of the things we really need to do to save a lot of these children from a fate that I see some of these homeless people dealing with is when they're in high school, let's fuck all this fucking learning history, learning, basically a bunch of shit you'll never use. Let's get rid of all that crap. Now let's get them into plumbing, electrician's work, welding, pipe fitting, whatever we got to do, whatever we think is going to be really necessary. Stop pushing these people towards a college that, okay, they got a skill, but then AI goes and replaces how many people? It's like, by the way, a lot of pissed off furry artists, furry porn, because, now AI is basically making that. We need people with hands-on skills that can build houses, they can do things in America and make things happen. And what we've seen from the failure of a lot of the boomers and Gen X and the millennials, what we've seen in the failure of that, I'm gonna be honest, we don't need to repeat that in another generation. We don't. This needs to change. And kick out a lot of the foreigners. I'm sorry, but no offense to a bunch of foreigners, but let's be real about it. The jobs for America should be for Americans first. I see people with H-1Bs, they can barely speak English in this country. Like that guard the other day when I was bumming change in that city, and I don't know how many miles, 70 miles away from here. That guard was Asian. He could barely speak English. He could speak English, but barely. He didn't understand the basics of the language. I was in a Costco getting a pizza. And another thin little Asian barely speak fucking English. The same thing with those truckers. Imagine for a second if they made it easier for you to become a trucker. For a while now, there's going to be trucking. That are 5, 10, 15 years, who knows? Robots will be doing all the driving. But at least it's something in the meantime. No rent, no utilities. You think about the drywall jobs, the concrete workers. They're all being taken by some of these foreign companies, and whether they're legal or not. And people say, well, legal. I do not know this guy, and he does not know me. He's probably thinking, who is this van, and why is this van here? Well, guy, I kind of slept here. I'm about to get up. But, yeah, I'm just saying. We got all these people living in houses. And they say out of all the immigrant workers, 18% of them are illegals. Well, fuck. Right there, just get rid of that 18% and see how much more housing, see how much less crime there is, see more jobs for regular folks. And then after that, then we got to start, we need to start having that conversational question. Hey, how many of these people coming to our country on H-1Bs, frankly, don't need to fucking be here? Because when I was younger, I'm telling you, that lady working at Costco, no offense to her, I ain't got no problem with, the particular Asian people. But I care more about my people than I care about you. I'd rather that a lot of these people that are potential drug addicts, instead of getting $1,000 a month for faking crazy or cranking out another welfare bastard Because let's be honest, that's most of them are. I'd rather those people go out and get those jobs. Even if it's like serving positions, jobs chicks can do. I'd like to see dudes doing plumbing, electrician work. Building homes, doing shit the world needs. And if there's one thing I wish we could break the mindset of, and it's just part of the American core, it's this whole obsession with flashy, stupid shit. Overpriced cars, overpriced homes, overpriced everything. All on credit. All on credit. I was talking to a banker the other day. I was bringing some money to put it in the bank. And we were talking about that. He's like, no, you're right. I see these people's credit scores. I see what they have, debt to ratios. And yeah, pretty much it's what is it? Like pro wrestling, they call it kayfabe. It's totally fucking fake. I wish we could break people of that, because there's still a lot of America that's affordable. You can find houses in the Midwest, like a 2-bedroom every day of the week for $50,000. The old people pass on. They don't want to keep the place. And so, the kids sell it, and nobody in the local area has any interest in buying it. So you can move in there and buy those houses. They're relatively affordable. So there is a hope. And maybe, who knows, maybe the Midwest, some factories in the Midwest, South, Texas, maybe that's the saving grace for a lot of working class people. Because what we're doing here on the West Coast is not fucking working. I'm glad there's soup kitchens to help people get food. I'm glad that there's food banks to help people get food. But it just seems absolutely ridiculous that at some point now it just feels like we've turned homelessness, which was a very solvable, curable thing when I was a kid, to something to where we're looking at it now. It's like managing, what's that fucking disease? Leprosy. It's like managing a skin disease. At first, it's a minor skin disease, but now it feels like we're managing leprosy. Managing fucking leprosy. And I don't know if you know this, but basically most of the world, we cured leprosy. Only the most dirtiest fucking places still exist. But that's the way it feels with the West Coast. Something that was treatable when I was a child is now just an accepted disease. So I've talked for a while. Let me read the comments. Okay, let's get this fucker out of here. You don't need to be here. I need to fucking talk to chat. I don't. If I feel like talking to the chat, I talk to chat. If I don't feel like talking to chat, then don't. And if I feel like you're a douchebag when I get done and read comments, then I'll just fucking block your ass, because what do I give a shit? Because most of your robots are retards anyways. I got a handful of real people that are good people, but most of you're robots and retards. Right, so take it easy. That's just my thought. All right, let's the leprosy.